Hi everyone, we will be beginning in less than 2 minutes. We will be beginning in 1 minute. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Mary Rubin and I am the past president of the Society of Florida Archivists. Today we are continuing our SFA Archives Month webinars. Today's webinar is slightly shorter than the others as we only have one presenter. Today we have Carady DeSimone, an independent contractor who will be sharing about her work at an engineering archive. And with that, I'll hand it over to Carady.
Thank you, Mary. So hello, everyone. This started as a poster, and I decided to use Prezi for this. And just to make sure, I just put into the chat a link, so you can also explore this kind of on your own if you wish. And briefly, I'm just going to go real quick into the Prezi help. This is one that I created. So you see, if you choose to go review later and kind of go into some more details or go back to anything that kind of piqued your interest, you'll have a kind of better idea of what's going on. So if you look down at the bottom of the screen, you have forward and back arrows. Now, the cool thing that I really like about Prezi is it is technically non-linear. So I've got everything in a logical order, what makes sense to me. But if you want to go back and look at a specific thing, you don't have to click through the entire presentation. So it's really nice. Or, if something just catches your eye and you go, oh, I want to read about this, but you don't care about, the introduction, for example, you can just skip that. If you ever get lost, over on the right hand of your screen, if you hover, there will be the up link and the home link. And the home is just going to take you back to this, this main screen, this overview screen. And also Prezi goes back to this. I've got it set to where it goes back to this overview screen between each section. This is a presentation based on my work with the Radiation Incorporated Archives, which are hosted still at Florida Tech's Florida Institute of Technology Archives. And unfortunately, the archive department there has been a COVID casualty. So I'm very sad, but the archive space instance is still up and you still can hop in and check out the collections. So the collections themselves are, I'm just going to go, let me just go and do this in order because I'm going to throw everything off if I don't. So this is help. We were just here. Basics. So a project, the most important concepts of defining a project is that it is going to be temporary and it has a goal. Some of these points kind of are more or less the same. It requires resources or assets. There's a customer or sponsor, there are stakeholders. and there's some amount of uncertainty. There's some flexibility, some vagueness that we can play with there. The Prezi did not move. Oh dear. Oh. I wonder what's going on. Pardon me one moment. Oh, you know what? I didn't actually reshare. I paused it and I didn't go back. There we go. Super sorry about that. Now I should be able to, does everything look better now? Okay. So all of the arrows that I was talking about, you probably are completely lost. These are the bottom of the screen arrows that I was talking about. I'm really sorry, guys. I tried to be smart and outsmarted myself. So I will just continue where I left off, which is here, discussing projects. And the triangle here is sometimes referred to as the iron triangle. And the running gag is that you can get two of these three items without sacrificing your quality. So you can either have something done cheaply, you can have something done quickly, or you can have something done that is like either really broad or really narrow. But you have to find where in this triangle you're willing to make sacrifices, or where the stakeholders are willing to give or not budge, depending on the project. And normally in a team setting, you will have 10 knowledge areas that are covered by either one person each, if you have that many people, or you have assignments worked out within the team that maybe human resources and communications would double up and be the same person. But a lot of archivists are lone arrangers, and so you really get to do most of it yourself. That can be kind of a pain. So Agile is not always pretty. It is oftentimes messy, but the benefit is that it's flexible. And so this is I call it a flavor of project management, or a style. Traditionally, Waterfall was more common, especially in the 1950s, which is where this collection comes from. And I can check some of their documents, and it was really interesting to see their project management style and how they put the pieces together. And that's kind of what got me into thinking of, oh, I bet you we could do that with archives, because there's so many moving pieces and there's so many different parts that go into the collection. So the benefit of Agile is that you have less invested if you need to pivot, and you are able to turn something around. You're able to go in a different direction without losing a whole bunch of progress that you've made, because you have these very small incremental deadlines and these incremental deliverables that can be either concurrent, or sometimes there are dependencies, but that enables you to give different folks different assignments. And this is, of course, different when you're giving all the assignments to yourself, but you just kind of take on different personalities, I suppose. So yes, Agile is Agile, but it can be kind of messy. You don't have to be in IT to be able to use these theories, these principles. I love Excel. I do a lot of tracking through Excel, and this is actually a version of my my tracking workflow where I tracked different dates and details of the collections. And this, of course, looks like probably nothing, definitely doesn't make sense right away, but I was able to give myself deadlines and kind of track my progress to figure out what's working or what's not. And that's the other benefit of Agile is you can adjust as you go. So I can say, well, you know, this collection's actually really, really, really messy. And this one's going to take me more time to process. So after I do a work plan, I kind of look over what I've got, what are we dealing with here. And this broad level overview, we get to intellectual arrangement. And the collections that I was working with were mostly organized, but unfortunately the donor had passed before I was involved, although he was very involved in the institution and the archives in general. I didn't get to meet him, but that's another story. So my first step is mind mapping. And this is kind of a breakdown of what I was thinking in an early version of these collections and that draft. And I know that some people go, oh, but that's all in, you know, that's spatial, that's not linear. So I have another version too, because the best way to work like an engineer is to think like one. But I have cheat codes. This collection was based in, it's based in Melbourne, Florida, and these folks were responsible for a lot of the component level electrical equipment that was in satellites and spacecraft. And they ended up merging with Harris. And that, if you're from Melbourne or know about Melbourne, L3 Harris is the current corporation, but it used to be Radiation Inc. And they just kind of merged together. But having this same background in electrical engineering, and this is it's a bit sync converter, so converting electrical signals. I'm basically like using electrical theory to process thoughts instead of, you know, signal. So once I get my intellectual arrangements settled and I figure out what I'm working with, some of the tasks that I do, I create the subject and agent list that I can work from independent of other things. I do the biographical, historical, miscellaneous text, and these are all different tasks that for each collection I'm juggling and having reviews, and there's a lot of moving parts. So probably the most difficult thing, documentation. Actually, we're going to documentation next. This draws largely from IT and engineering again. Put it in writing, avoid mistakes. Mistakes in their field could be deadly, even like the Challenger. And so it was very imperative for everything to be in writing. And this little stamp or sticker appeared on so many documents. And it got me thinking and reflecting on my work, saying, okay, well, I should log that I removed all the physical, or I removed all the digital media and put it into one box so that there's at least a record of it. And if, you know, years later when we have more accruals, somebody can go, well, why did you make this decision? And now there's some record of why I made that decision. My favorite tool for this is a Gantt chart. And this here is kind of a reflective Gantt. Our practicum requirements was 135 hours, and I had no idea what to expect. So when my supervisor says, what's a reasonable deadline for you? I blanked. I had no clue. I had no idea. I've never worked in archives before. Most of my education was online, and I wasn't sure. But we had this open house scheduled, and we decided, okay, reasonable goal, let's try and get the Founders Collection completed in time for the open house. And we were able to host that in October of last year. So one thing that this chart shows is also how interlapping the work could get. Is that, see, I could start 2 collections, collections 7 and 11, at the same time, because maybe it looks like 11 was really small. So I was able to just go through that and then set it aside and then work on my notes. And so I kind of did this iterative processing through multiple collections simultaneously sometimes, and it works. If you have a basis of what 135 hours looks like in your institution, I would love to hear from you. It was about, I think, 30 linear feet, 10 linear feet, excuse me. Of course, it depends. So student labor practices in the archives have been kind of on my research radar since I started looking for an internship, which was 2017. And it's a big deal, especially with COVID now. So we've got some research projects on the back burner, and I would love to hear what student archival goals and standards anyone else has. Going back real quick to the timeline, this timeline here shows progress, the overlapping progress, and external events such as Hurricane Dorian, records management seminar for the Department of State, and our open house. And it's really fun when you start to put context behind it. So the larger timeline here, this is the radiation history. They were founded in the 1950s, early 1950s, by George Shaw and Homer Denius. And Homer Denius's daughter, actually, she didn't make the open house, but she actually did come and visit, and I was able to meet her and tell her how cool it was to dig through all her dad's old stuff, because that's kind of what I did. But FIT and radiation were very, very interconnected. They founded the school so that they could have new, fresh archive or engineering students, excuse me, to be able to work, because they basically couldn't keep up with the space race almost. So I consider the work that I did to be like the finishing touches of the radiation ink history. It's just it looks really nice, but it's really just the last little bit. So all of the collections, a lot of the collection materials are still available through, I believe they have an Omeka site, and all of the finding aids are available on ASpace still. The picture here is a TLD satellite dish that the radiation folks built, and so they would travel internationally and build communications equipment, and they replaced a dish on a carrier, which was actually equipment I would have worked on. And so at the open house, it was my honor to meet these folks and say, hey, I know on a component level what you did, and it's amazing. And I had a blast with this collection, and I learned so much, not just about Florida or the space race, but also just small companies and how they work was, I think, probably the most that I learned. So throughout this past year, some of the tools that I used a lot of Excel. The timelines I built all in Tableau, which is a whole other side of That was a whole other learning experience. Archive space, I worked in like a mid-level user. So there was additional stuff on the back end that was over my head, but it's a step up from the user UI. And then yes, those other tools. The archival tools I found really, really helpful. So a big shout out to the Stuart Rose MARBL at Emory. That collection, or that processing guide was, then when I found it, and additionally, the red flag workshop from last year's SFA kind of got me into the touch it once theory of, well, let's expedite processing by doing it this way. I do have a couple photo credits. So a few things weren't mine. Anything that was mine, please contact me if you'd like to share it. I'm totally just want to make sure that I've got like the Creative Commons mark on it. And then just briefly, it is kind of a current events, and I just want to acknowledge that we are all on treaty land, whether it was ceded or unceded, and on a personal level, my family would not exist had it not been for our cousins, the Micmac, and they are currently disputing fishing treaty rights in Canada. So if you are interested in that, please reach out, look it up. And awkward ending, I have a kitty. And my contact, please, yes, contact me if you have any questions. I think we have time for questions now, probably as well.
We do.
Okay, I did not check on time at all.
So the YouTube is slightly delayed, so if anyone has questions, feel free to submit them in the chat there. If anyone in the Zoom has any questions, please feel free to type those in the chat or even come over audio, and I will give individuals 10 seconds before I ask my question. Thank you so much.
I can always go back and show a specific part too.
Thank you so much for sharing today. I want to check out that Rose, the GitHub that you mentioned.
It was amazing. I'm pretty sure it was the Stuart Rose was the one where I just had like a mind explosion, because they were the only person to finally say, yeah, I would say it takes about 4 hours. And they were the first folks to put a number on it. And so I've been kind of testing that a little bit.
So when you were going through the project management basics and you were showing off in Excel, you mentioned that you were able to track what was working and what was not. Is there anything that you recall that was not working?
The most difficult thing for me was coming into a collection halfway. And that's the VB, that's the work that was done by the prior intern. And so it's kind of like, well, I can't, I want to make sure that she gets her credit and she's, acknowledged, but at the same time, I can't necessarily, if I'm going to be putting my name on something, I want to do it this way. And basically what I ended up having to do was some of the ephemera, I wish I had time to box that up more properly. And some of the film, again, so the red flags really that's what the most of it was.
Makes sense. Would you mind explaining a little bit more about the different areas of the spreadsheet that we're looking at?
So as you can see, I only did a work plan on 3 of them. And that's because I kind of jumped in and I have to figure things out as I go. So the inventory status, the condition, I believe that's coming from the Stuart Rose guide. And so then I move from the original inventory to the notes and flags. And that's just kind of giving me an idea of physically what I'm dealing with. And then we've got the size in various dimensions. I think this is a screenshot from the middle because there are some blanks.
Yeah, when I originally saw this, I thought this was all one collection, so I was confused about
No,
the different
I'm
sizes.
sorry. There's there ended up being, I think, 5 or 6 collections in the archive itself.
Very
So
nice.
the first one was the largest, and it kind of also prepared me for the rest, and so I got quicker as I went on. And then physical arrangement, my documents and documents review, and then for archive space, I was able to do rapid data entry with basically, again, spreadsheet. There's a plugin I've heard. There's a plugin either in development or in testing to be able to import Excel into archive space, but we did not get to play with that.
Yeah, I believe FSU uses that. So it's available now.
Yes.
There is a question over the YouTube channel. What percentage of time did you spend in planning versus executing the project?
I would have to go through my notes. I would definitely have to go review my work log. But it was more about like keeping track of what you are doing and then reviewing kind of as you go. So it was not like a big prep chunk and then a big work chunk. It's more like interspersed and just little things that you can do as you go to make things flow more smoothly.
Yeah, the individual followed up with also mentioning and documenting what was done. So I think you covered that. If there are any other questions, please feel free to include them in the chats. Will this presentation be on the SFA website? Yes, so the poster is already listed, and then the link to this YouTube stream is also on there as well. Any other questions? Was the Excel spreadsheet part of the poster? So the Excel spreadsheet is not on the SFA website, if that is the question. Carady, is that something that you would be able to provide? The Excel?
I might be able to. As a image or as an Excel or
I would assume the Excel.
I believe I could share it. I might have to upload it to Google and share it that way, and that kind of as an example, absolutely.
Okay. Another question from YouTube. How did you file the documentation with the collection?
That I am very curious. I believe it's with the administrative documents for the collection. They're all stored on the server. If it were my decision, I would put a folder 0 in the very first box, and that is your admin documentation.
Any other questions? Carady, I'm very impressed with what you were able to get done. You had mentioned looking at what other people had done in internships. So I can say with undergrads, they do interns at UCF for 150 hours, and usually they are given a 4-box to 5-box collection. And then depending on that and how far it takes them into their 150 hours, they may get another half-box, 1-box collection after that. But not as many boxes as you received.
I was so intimidated. I was like, oh, 36. Am I even going to finish this? Is this even doable? And my supervisor, my direct supervisor was she was technically a curator, but had a background in HR. So she's asking me, well, when do you think you'll be done? I'm like, I'll tell you when I know. So it was definitely, it was a learning experience. It was jumping in feet first and finding out what works.
Thank you so much for sharing. A comment from the Zoom, very impressive. A comment from YouTube, thanks. That is such a concern that there are orphans out there. This seems like a great way to process. And I assume that means
Orphan collections, maybe.
The documentation, I suspect, from the collection.
Yeah.
Not sure if that person wants to further elaborate, so we'll give them the 20-second delay that YouTube has for us. Any other questions out there? If not, we'll give another 30 to 45 seconds, and then we will cut the feed. Thank you again, Carady.
Yeah.
Well, there are no more. Oh, sorry. There is a comment. Yes, that was regarding the documentation being housed on the server. The comment that says there is such a concern that there are orphans out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of my working documents is in a file on the server for special collections. I just have a copy.
Well, thank you again. I'm going to cut the feed. Thank you all for attending today, and I hope to see you on Friday.